I like to have a rotation where I have some reeds that I'm playing actively and some reeds that I'm breaking in. And then even within your reeds, there are some reeds that just work better than other reeds. So once I have broken my reeds in, then I start making determinations about, oh, this reed is good enough to practice on, but I don't really love the sound of it. So if it's not sitting really, really flat against the reed, or if it's not really flat up here, it'll all start to vibrate at different times, and it just won't respond as well. It won't vibrate as well because it's warped. There is so much to know about reeds, and I feel that every clarinetist has their own routine and their own way of going about business. So again, I just want you to discover and figure out what works for you, but hopefully we'll give you some good concepts of sort of the important things that every clarinetist pays attention to. So the first thing that we want to talk about is the importance of breaking your reeds in. And what I mean by that is that when you get a reed out of the box, just in the package, what you don't want to do is just open it up and slap it on your mouthpiece and just play it. Does that work? Yeah, it will probably work out of the box, and that will probably be fine. And if it's an emergency, go ahead and do it. We've all done it at some point in our lives. But if you do that, the reeds will not be as consistent. They'll change a lot, and they just won't last as long either. And so you want to get into this habit of having a rotation, that you have some reeds that you're breaking in, some reeds that you're playing, some reeds that are carrying on towards the end of their life, and that you're always just breaking reeds in to be part of that system so that you will always have reeds that work rather than be stuck and not have enough reeds, and then you're sort of forced to just play out of the box whatever works. Okay, so let's talk about that first. How do I break my reeds in? And back to disclaimer, large disclaimer at the beginning of this course. The way I do it might not be the way other people do it. Everybody has their own way. So read up and talk to other people and see what you think. I think that people sort of have strong opinions about these things, so I'm trying to keep it away from the strong opinions and just share with you what I do and what works for me. So what I do is when I get a reed that's in the package, I just open up the package, right? And this package isn't opening up very well. So we're gonna open up the package. And what I just do is the very first thing I do is I take them out of the whatever packaging they came in, and I actually put the date on the back of the reed, right? So put whatever, like the month and the day on the back of the reed, and I number the reeds. And so the reason I do that is so I can kind of keep track of which batch every reed was from. And I also usually put a little, like every time I play a reed when I'm breaking it in, I put a tick mark at the base of the reed. And that's so I can tell how many days that I've sort of played it before it's ready to move into rotation. So like I said, that's the very first thing I do. I write the month and the day on the reed. I number the reed out of the box. I put a little tick mark. And then I literally just play the reed. I play it for only about not very long, like a minute per reed. And I do about a minute per reed for about the first 5 days that I'll play on a reed. So I'll just play it for 5 minutes. I'll put it on, play it a minute, no more. And then I literally put it away. And after I've sort of done that for about 5 days, then I sort of start making judgments on what kind of reed it is. Do I like the reed? Do I not like the reed? And I sort of start sorting it into other categories. But before that time, it can change rather a lot in those first 5 days, because keep in mind, it was once a live thing and now it's not. So it's organic. It's going to be changing. So 5 days, I play it no more than a minute. I try to not play too loud. I try to not play too high. I just kind of keep it easy. Like I'm just trying to get the reeds fibers to vibrate and to get into the idea that it's going to vibrate more. So that's all I do to break them in. However, I think it's important for you to think about how are you going to store the reed. That's pretty critical too, because you want to store the reed at at a constant humidity level, and you want to keep it stable. That's what's going to make your reeds most consistent for you, is if you can kind of keep them a stable humidity, a stable temperature as much as possible. So once you're breaking in your reeds, I might just show you some of the different storage situations you have. There's nothing wrong if a reed comes in a little plastic container and that's all you have. That's okay too. You can put it back in the plastic container. But what the critical thing is that they have these days are these humidifier packs. It's made by the Boveda company. And it's just this little it's a humidity pack. I think they also use them for cigars. But what it does is it takes extra moisture out of a container, or it puts moisture in so that you can keep it consistent. So I really like the reed cases that have these contained within them and that are airtight, because then you sort of know each of the reed packs have a humidity level. So they have reed packs that are 50% or 60% or 70%, and they're pretty small. You can just get these online. You can just order them and find them. You can also find them in some music stores. You can also find them in cigar stores. Guitar stores sometimes have them. Anything that you need to keep something at a relatively stable humidity level. So this is a reed case made by the clarinetist Brad Bain here in the United States. And I like it because it has one of these little Boveda packs in it. And I like it because it's airtight. He's a clarinetist, so he's kind of figured out how to make it an airtight situation. So what's cool about that is with the 72% Boveda pack in there and the airtight situation is then I just put my reed in and I don't even have to do anything. Also, these ones have little holes, so that's really great because the water will evaporate out so your reed doesn't warp. We're going to talk about that in a minute. So if I just play my reed for my 1 minute and I put my little tick mark, I know what reed that is, and I just put them in my little airtight situation with my Boveda humidity, then that reed from day to day that I play it for the minute, it doesn't change up a lot. It stays really stable and really consistent. And I love that because I feel like the reeds will change enough. As much as you try to keep them stable, they're going to change. And so whatever we can do to keep them consistent is good, because you want to know what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So here's one of Brad Bain's cases. Here's another one. I think he 3D prints them, and you can kind of see better here. There's a seal on it, so it keeps it really, really stable. The humidity pack, I put this in there probably a month or two ago, and it's still just working fine. You can tell when the humidity packs are ready to be changed because they get really hard and crunchy and crispy. And so if it's flexible and it's sort of puffy still, it's still doing the job. This one fits 10 reeds, so that's nice because that's a box of reeds. Yeah, so then you keep your reeds just nice and consistent. I personally don't like to soak my reeds very much, and the reason is I have soaked them in the past, but with these humidity packs, you can keep your reeds at a really nice consistent humidity level that I don't even need to soak them because they are humid enough that they'll vibrate. And I find that if I don't soak, the soak and dry process really the reed changes a lot. And so when I used to soak my reeds and dry, that moist dry cycle really makes them change more and really makes them warp more, and they stay less consistent. So I have found that by not soaking my reeds, they really are more consistent. They don't change as much, and I don't need to soak them because they're already at like a 69 or 72% humidity level with these awesome Boveda packs. So okay, so for breaking in your reeds, break them in. That means playing them just a little bit right out of the box, not very much. That means labeling them so you know what day and what month and what reed out of the box, so you know which reed is which for later. We're going to get to why that's important in just a minute. That means don't play too loud, don't play too high, just 1 minute, sort of easy. In your warm-up is a nice time to be breaking your reeds in, and put it directly into your storage source as soon as you have done that 1 minute of playing for about 5 days. And then after 5 days, you can start playing it a little bit more at a time, maybe 5 minutes or so. What I did want to point your attention to is this concept of warpage that I sort of alluded to earlier. Because when I have a reed that doesn't work, more often than not, it's because it has warped. And so I wanted to introduce that to you and tell you a little bit about that, how you know if it is warped, what you do if it is warped. So the short explanation is if you have a reed that has dried and it is not flat, not perfectly flat on the back, typically the reeds we get right out of the box, right out of the package are really, really flat. And so when a reed dries, and if it dries too quickly, or if it dries, I'll tell you about, if it dries basically in a not really flat way, that is warpage. And why that matters is because the table of our mouthpiece is flat, right? This part right here of our mouthpiece is really, really flat. And so what you need, the reed needs to sit against it in a really flat way for it to be able to vibrate optimally. So if it's not sitting really, really flat against the reed, or if it's not really flat up here, it'll all start to vibrate at different times, and it just won't respond as well. It won't vibrate as well because it's warped. And that can happen really quickly. So let's talk about the warpage. How do you know if it's warped? And there are a couple ways you can do. The first is if you have just a little piece of glass. I actually carry around a little piece of glass with me. I have a little zip bag that I keep in my clarinet bag, and I just have this little piece of glass in there. You can just get this from a glass store. It's just you can even actually probably get it made out of fiberglass, and you just want to have them around the corners. But basically, if you were to moisten the back of the reed, and if you were to stick it on the glass, if it's really, really flat, you cannot rock that reed back. There is no motion in there at all. Like, it just won't move. It's kind of stuck on there. In fact, if I were to, you can just feel and see the reed is really stuck against that glass. Like, it's not coming off, right? I unfortunately don't have any warped reeds in my box right now because I'm really vigilant about that element. But if you did have warpage, it would rock, either it would rock side to side, like right to left, or it would rock front to back. You just wouldn't be able to get it to stick on that glass particularly well. So that's one way that you can tell if your reed is warped. Sometimes if you are in a rehearsal and say, for instance, it's really cold outside and so the heat is really high in a rehearsal space, the reed can actually warp on the mouthpiece. And what happens then is it's just the heat is on so high that it doesn't take very long for just all the moisture to wick out of the reed. And then it just dries in a not flat way against the mouthpiece. And how you can tell that is if we do what's called the suction test. And that is if I have my reed on my mouthpiece and I just take my barrel off and I'm going to stick the bottom of my barrel against the fleshiest part of my hand right there. And then I'm going to try and suck all the air out of that, like I'm trying to create a vacuum. So you really just literally suck as if you're trying to make your barrel stick to your hand, right? Like this. And if your reed is not warped, you'll get a suction, okay? So you'll actually feel a vacuum, you'll suck and you'll feel the vacuum being created immediately. And either you can pull it off your hand or you can wait. This is a really not warped reed because it's taking quite a long time it's about to pop. It's about to pop, like that, okay? So this is a really flat reed. If your reed is not flat, you will not be able to create a suction against your hand in the first place. This is a really great reed because it actually, can you see it actually? There was so much suction that it made a little ring on my hand, right? So if your reed is warped, you're not going to be able to create that suction, or the pop is immediately. So if either of those two things is the case, that's probably an indication that your reed is warped. In other words, your reed is not flat. So then you say to yourself, oh, okay, how do I fix that then? And there are several ways to fix that. Um, Basically, what you want to do is take material off the back of the reed to return it to its flat state. So if I say that to you, then you would think, oh, I need to make it flat again. You could use sandpaper to do that. You could use a mill file to do that. You could use a reed knife to do that. I like to use this tool. It's a Reed Geek. And this is my new favorite reed tool because it's like a reed knife and everything all in one. It's really easy. I can get it through security on the airplane. They don't stop me like they would if I had a reed knife. And so basically, all you're going to do is you just put it on a flat surface and you just swipe. I just use the edge of the Reed Geek and I just pull. Now, this isn't going to work great because we know that this reed isn't flat. But basically, you just pull, and it's just like, imagine that this was a razor, and imagine that this has whiskers on it. You'll just pull, pull. And so I would say to you, every reed warps a tiny little bit. In fact, I usually, before I play on a reed, after I've used it and it's been in my box, I usually just go ahead and do a few swipes with my Reed Geek, because even if I'm diligent and even if my reed is staying at a consistent humidity level, it's going to dry a little bit imperfectly. Like it'll dry with just little bits on there. And so then you just want to pretend like this is the razor and this is the skin, and you're just scraping the whiskers off. That's basically all you're doing. So a small amount of warpage is normal, and that's going to be easy to take care of. The more warped your reed is, the more dramatic measures you're going to have to take. So sandpaper might work. Probably if you're going to use sandpaper, you would want like 600 grit, probably wet dry sandpaper. A mill file works. In any of those cases, you want to make sure to stay away from the tip of the reed. Okay. When I was young, sometimes you'll notice that the tip of the reed might dry a little wavy style, and I thought that was the warp. I thought that's how you could tell, and actually that's not really it. It's more dramatic than that. Okay. So in sum, just to give you the broad overview, again, warpage is when your reed dries and it's not flat. You can determine if it's warped by if you can rock it or keep it flat and stuck to a piece of glass, or you can do a suction test on your mouthpiece. You can very easily get rid of the warpage using tools like a Reed Geek or a file or sandpaper. But just to reiterate, if you store your reeds in a constant humidity situation, they will not warp very much. So hopefully you won't have to do dramatic measures. A couple of other things you can do to prevent warpage. One very easy yet very overlooked thing is to just use your mouthpiece cap, right? So say you're playing on your reed, and so whenever you're not playing then, so if you're in a rehearsal, you're playing along, now the conductor stops and is going to work with another section for a while, and we'll just put your mouthpiece cap on, right? Because that means that if the heat's on or whatever, the water is just not going to evaporate out of the reed quickly, if at all, because the mouthpiece cap is on. So the mouthpiece cap is significant for protecting the mouthpiece, but also for preventing reed warpage, right? In fact, one thing you can do if you are in a really hot and dry environment is if you have a little bit of water that you have with you at the rehearsal just to stay hydrated, just rub a little bit of a dot of water into that reed and then put the mouthpiece cap on. And that will really help keep your reed consistent. You'll pull your mouthpiece cap on and then you can just play. You don't have to take it off the mouthpiece and re-wet it or do anything like that either. So that's a really nice thing to think about. The other thing is if you take your reed off your mouthpiece, then you want to be careful where you set it down. I sometimes will see students just set their reed down like flat surface against flat surface, and I just cringe because that's kind of, if you forget about your reed and it's against the flat surface, you can kind of imagine that it's going to dry out warped because the reed is not the same thickness. So the outsides will dry faster than the insides. The thinner parts of the reeds will dry out faster than the thicker parts, and that's what creates warpage. So easy enough is if you take your reed off and you're swabbing your clarinet or you're doing whatever, always set your reed with the flat side up. because then it won't dry. It won't dry like flat against flat. It just won't warp as easily. It'll just be fine. And then you can just stick it back on your mouthpiece. Sometimes you might, when you take your reed off, you might see the window of the mouthpiece in the reed. And sometimes that means that the reed has changed to be the shape of the mouthpiece window. And probably it's warped then too. So then just go back and use your reed geek or your reed knife and just flatten it out again before you stick it back in your case. Okay. Okay, so that's warpage. We're going to get to the next topics in just a second.